stopping by the Spotlight Series. I'm your host, Scott Nerney. Don't forget to subscribe. There's some fantastic things you'll want to see every week that we have guests on. It's Tuesday night to Squeeze It In, and we have a fantastic author and organizational leader, Mary T. O'Sullivan from Encore Executive Coaching. Welcome to the Spotlight Series.
Thank you, Scott. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have a very long career. I've had 4 different career changes in my life.
Okay.
I started off as a high school English teacher many years ago. And for a lot of different reasons, I got recruited to come into corporate to help them actually write and organize some major work that they did. And it was, thousands of pages, up to 10,000 pages. And I ended up staying in that business since the 80s, really. Since about 85. I retired in 2013, and as part of my package, I was fortunate enough to receive an educational stipend, and I took that educational stipend and I put it towards becoming a credentialed ICF coach.
Which isn't easy.
No, it isn't, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there are a lot of people out there, and I feel bad for people that go to some of these people that claim to be coaches. They're not credentialed. They are not credentialed by the International Coaching Federation. Some of them don't even have degrees. Some of them don't have master's degrees. So if you really want a good coach, you have to look at the person's credentials. So yes, it was a year of difficult study. It was on the graduate level. I took my classes at a university. I already had a master's, so I didn't go for the second master's, which was part of that program. So it was a lot of hard work, and I'm happy to say that it's been a very good career change over the last 10 years.
There's a big difference between someone who makes a program and has the experience than someone who just repackages Dale Carnegie and a couple of other things out there and says, this is my new program, and because it's new to you, you'll love it.
Right.
So credit to you to taking all that experience and your education experience. So when you're talking to these companies, and let's use the generic company, because a lot of them have different needs and different problems, but when we see one-size-fits-all leadership, and you're going in to talk to companies, and let's say companies are out there looking right now, whether it's a worker or a leader, what would you say to them about that one-size-fits-all style?
Well, it really doesn't exist, because there are as many styles as there are people. Because when you become a leader and you walk into that role, you're still that same individual you were before. One of the big issues, though, is that some people undergo a little bit of a negative transition, and they get power hungry. And so what I try to teach people is to treat your employees and your peers as you would treat your family and friends. So you wouldn't say, F you to your wife. So why would you say that at work? So that's the approach that I use. I also role play with some of these people. So I've had clients come in from large companies. They tell me about a meeting they had, and they're dominating. They're standing up over the people, and they're criticizing everybody around the table. So I listened to this story from this particular client, and I was quiet for a little bit. I let it settle in what he had just said, and I said to him, how would you like it if your boss came into your meeting and said, your work is all messed up, you guys aren't doing your jobs, this is all a bunch of crap, start over again. And he was so shocked when I said that. When he put himself in that position, I really thought he was going to fall off the chair. He was absolutely floored with that story. So what I like to get people to do is, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. So the people that, try to be that command and control, that's really old school. People are not responding to that anymore. People are walking away from that. That's why it's so difficult to hire people now. And that's why there's so many openings, because people aren't going to take a bad boss or a bad working environment. In fact, there's a lot of research out there about why people quit and why people stay. And the number one reason why people stay on the job is because they like their coworkers, regardless of the environment or the circumstances, and they all stick together and they stick up for one another. But without that support, people will leave, especially the younger generation. And I think a lot of bosses who are in the older age groups don't understand that the younger generation isn't going to work 18 hours a day. They just don't do that anymore.
Right. I think a lot of people forget that it's not like the inflation times where I once heard a boss say, if you don't like it, there's the door. There's 12 more people waiting with a resume to come to your spot. That doesn't happen anymore. There's 12 more spots for the first person that walks through the door these days.
Right.
And I think leadership forgets that.
Absolutely. That really is the basis of my entire coaching philosophy and the reason I wrote this book. Because I've chatted with people when they ask me about, tell me a little bit about the book. And I just tell them, listen, have you ever had an experience at work that if you told somebody they wouldn't believe you? In other words, these are things that you cannot make up. And so that's really what's in the book. All these stories that I saw unfold in front of me, that if you put a script together and brought it to Hollywood, they would throw you out the door because you can't make this stuff up. So, and then they get it. When I'm telling people this is what I do, I help people figure out how they're going to act when something so incredible happens at work that either makes you want to quit or you see your coworkers walking out the door.
And when you're talking about coaching, you're talking about coaching both sides, I assume. The leadership for what you should be doing, but also the employees who could be smaller leaders, but they should be
Right.
looking at that next level up.
Yes.
So talk about how you address both of those at the same time.
Well, it's an interesting challenge because I do get both sides of the coin. With workers that come in, they're looking to grow, but most of the ones that I see are looking to just survive. They don't understand how to manage their way or navigate their way through this corporate morass, and they end up getting themselves in trouble. Well, over the years, I'm kind of like Tom Brady in the way. When Brady gets out on the field, he knows just about every play, every move, every position, and what that position is going to do. Since I worked in these large corporations for so many years, I have seen just about every situation. So I can coach people that are struggling with a hostile work environment or with a bad boss. And there's a lot of choices that have to be made at that point. And I have to ask people, what's the path that you want to take? Do you want to stay in this position because you've been there 19 years? You have a mortgage, you have kids in college, your wife is sick, she can't work. What other choices do you have? Well, they don't have a lot of choice. So we work on coping mechanisms to get to that 20-year point. And then there's the other path where they've really had it. Maybe they haven't been there that long, maybe 10 years, maybe 7 years, but they have a lot of experience. So there's options. And of course, in today's working environment, people can find other jobs, maybe even a remote position. So then we try to strategize how we're going to get to that next level. for people that want to move up, they have to figure out, what is the path. So I had one client one time that really wanted to get on the partner path. He was in a partnership arrangement. So I asked him, well, how do the other people that are working in this company get to the next level? He said, well, they spend a lot of time with the boss. And I said, well, so what's stopping you from doing the same thing? He said, oh, I don't like to bother him. I can't ever catch him. I said, well, you need to spend time with your boss. Make an appointment, get on his calendar, bring him a cup of coffee, or meet him someplace if he's traveling, meet him in DC or Philly or wherever he's going to be, and sit down and have a real career chat with him, like how am I going to advance? And what happened was he found out that he wasn't even on the partner track, that no matter what he did in that position, he wasn't going to grow. So that's really the first thing when a leader wants to advance, is you have to figure out what those stepping stones are. And if you find that you're not on the partner track, you got to figure out something else.
Yeah.
Right? So with that particular client, I was working with him, and then the pandemic hit. And when I saw him next after the pandemic, his whole agenda had completely changed. He was still with the company. He was still making good numbers. But now they had a second baby. And to him, it was more important to spend family time than to be in that rat race to try to get to the partner level. So he was happy where he was. And that's how we concluded the engagement. He was satisfied. And sometimes that happens when people have to decide what they want to do, and they get to the decision point and they realize that they really don't want to do anything differently than they're already doing.
Sure.
And that's the fascinating part of my work.
And one thing we want to touch, we talk about the pandemic, is the remote workers. It's a completely different skill set.
Absolutely.
In corporate world, I had remote workers, I've had local workers. You have to wear a different hat, and sometimes people have both at the same time.
Right.
You coach the challenges there as well?
Well, most of the challenge comes from the pushback from the leaders, from the managers. It's called RTO, Return to Office. So they're putting a lot of RTO mandates out there, and people don't like it. People are actually quitting their job if they can't get at least a hybrid model. And a lot of companies are clamping down on even the hybrid model. They want people in the office. I think Google is one of them. They want people back in the office, which seems ridiculous. For Google, it's a big computer company. It's a big software company. Everything they do, people are just sitting at their computers all day long.
Yep.
And the other thing that happened, I think it was Google, and that's happened across the board, is that people are thinking, okay, I can work remotely, so I'm not going to live in LA anymore, where it costs,
Sure.
thousands of dollars a month for an apartment. I'm going to move to Cleveland and pay $600 a month. But their salary is based on living in LA. So what some of these companies started to do was to reduce people's salaries, and that created a huge uproar. So they had to stop doing that because people were really quitting, really walking away then.
Right.
So yes, the remote controversy is really coming from management. I've noticed on LinkedIn, a lot of the job postings are specifying on-site or remote or hybrid. And I actually look through quite a few of them because there are lots of coaching positions open all over the country. So I'm assuming these are going to be remote positions. Wrong. South Carolina, Houston, Texas, Denver. I'm not going to go to any of those places.
No.
And it specifies on site. So if I get an offer from a coaching company, if it isn't remote, I'm not going anyplace.
Yeah, I agree. So tell us a little bit about the book. I see there's two different versions here. There's a regular
Yes,
book and a field guide.
exactly.
And give us a little overview of what we see.
Okay, so this book, this is a very interesting story about how this book came to be. This book came out of my master's degree papers and essays that I had to submit. And I got an A on every single paper. So my husband said during the pandemic, he goes, "You have a book. You need to write a book." And I'll tell you a little bit about my program at Quinnipiac. We had to take all the leadership theories that were being presented to us, and we had to write about our jobs, our actual work environment, like our bosses, our coworkers, all kinds of observations about work. Well, going back to you can't make it up, I had so much material I could have written 2 books, seriously. So during the pandemic, I got a grant I got some money from the state and I got some money from the federal government, and I scraped up enough money to hire 2 editors. They went through all of my writing. They kind of cleaned up the academic bent that they had. We had to eliminate a lot of the names and titles, and do all that kind of serious scrub to make it a book that could be sold on the market without anybody getting sued. And so these are real stories that actually happened to me and to other people at these companies where I worked. And again, there really are stories that you can't make up. So I finished the book and I was about to start promoting it when the promoter said to me, "Well, where's your workbook?" So I said, "You got to be kidding me. I just finished writing a book. It took me 8 months to write this book. Now I've got to write another one." So I really had to catch myself, because as a former English teacher, I was like writing these, detailed questions. And I started to think to myself, well, this is stupid. People just want to write down some examples from their own lives, their own companies. They don't have to memorize this book. So I changed how I wrote the field guide, the workbook, to make it a practical guide for HR people or leaders to take the book, use it as a guide, and then apply some of the concepts in the book to their teams. So that's how this came about. And I really have had quite a few HR people buy both books and use the books with their teams to help enhance their business climate or
That's
help
great.
their workers. So that's how the 2 books came to be. And I'm also working on another book right now, which will be out probably late November. It's a new version of this book. I've added 4 new chapters based on some of the changes that have come about in the workforce since COVID. So
Right.
I have a chapter on quiet quitting, for instance.
Yep.
And I think I added a chapter on imposter syndrome, that's becoming a real problem, especially with people that have moved up quickly in their organizations or in their jobs. They've hit an industry that just is taking off, but yet they don't know how to cope with that success.
Okay. And where would folks who are watching this find your books?
So my books are both available at Amazon.com.
Okay.
You can find it right there on Amazon. And also on November 9th, I'm going to be at the Rhode Island Manufacturers Association Expo. I think it's from 8:30 to 12 maybe, or 3. I'm not sure of the times rather. But it is November 9th, and I will be there in person selling the books. And when I do a conference like that, I sell the 2 together for $30. This is $15 by itself, and this is $25 by itself. So they can get both books for $30.
Great. And your website?
My website is www.encoreexecutivecoaching.com.
Great.
And I'm having a new website rolled out within the next couple of weeks.
Okay. I think it's fantastic, taking the experience that not only you have, but everybody that you've worked with has.
Right.
A lot of folks will see themselves in those stories.
Absolutely.
And see the better way things can turn out. So I applaud what you're
Absolutely.
working on.
Absolutely. Well, every story has a what if the person actually did this instead of that. And that's where the theory comes in.
Right.
That's reflected in the story.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.